back in time.
I feel like that should be a dance.
Can you imagine?
Every so often it's gonna be, no, damn it! Do you want to get the singing out of your system now?
No.
The minute he walks through.
Oh no.
It was just a joke.
Can't even snapped it.
Hi everybody.
God.
On my mind, gotta get right to the point. Hi everybody, welcome to the second episode of the second season of Nights at the Round Table, which is very exciting for all of us, I think we'll all agree. Today we will be discussing The Graveyard Book by Neil Gaiman. It is a delightful book for children about a young boy whose family is brutally murdered, and then he's raised by ghosts in a graveyard. So,
We're starting off the year on a happy note.
Yeah, it was quite a read, but I will let you go first, Rob. What were your first impressions of this book?
You know what? Given the name of the book, The Graveyard, I had never heard anything about this book before going into it. So just based off of the name, I thought the book was going to be a lot more depressing than it was. And it started off with, with the kid's family getting murdered. And I was like, okay, how is this a young adult book? But it actually didn't really feel very depressing to me.
No.
For most of the book, it was actually pretty upbeat for its topic.
Once you get past the first chapter.
Yeah.
Your turn.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, for sure. I think even in the murder, when it's taken the perspective of the murderer, like if it's written as an adult book, obviously it would have written a bit more graphically about what was done and stuff, but it was kind of glossed over. Okay, I killed this person, I killed that person. Not necessarily what and how and the screams and all that kind of stuff, like say Michael Crichton might write. But as a whole, I agree. Like it kept things pretty light and pretty cheerful, even though the child was basically in the graveyard for most of the book.
Happiest book about having your family killed ever.
Okay, just start things off. One thing about that scene you were just talking about that sort of bothered me a little bit was when they started off the book really from the killer's point of view.
Yeah.
Then they switched over to the infant's point of view. And I think they said that the kid was, what, 6 months or something? He had just started to barely walk around. And you were getting an awful lot of information from this infant's point of view.
Not when he was that little. No, it was mostly from the ghost point of view, when they found him. And
No, I mean, like, just the infant going down the stairs, the decisions it was making it up the hill into the graveyard. I mean, it was necessary to get the story started, but right off the bat I was like, this is stretched a little bit.
I think the key with that is I very much was trying to read it as if I was still in the age range it was intended for. So I think that made a lot of difference. Like I don't know, there are a lot of kids' books where, there'll be a child of that age who it's all written from their point of view, which you buy when you're that age. Or, obviously.
Case in point, I was never that age.
You were born like this. Yes.
Born like this.
Yeah, I think I was very much trying to read it as a 10-year-old because I had the same reaction when I started it. And I did know the first sentence because I think Neil Gaiman was interviewed. Was it Stephen Colbert? He was on Stephen Colbert. He was on something. And anyways, the host said, so this is your children's book. It's called The Graveyard Book. And the first sentence is, there was a hand in the darkness and it held a knife. And I was like, okay, so I know the first sentence, so I was sort of prepared, but then as I was reading, I was like, this is horrible, this is so upsetting, I hate this story. And I was like, but it's always that question of, the things that freak me out and make me very upset now are not the same things that upset me then, so I don't know if I would
But there was pictures.
There were, and I think there were more pictures in that first chapter of the killer and the knife and him going up the stairs and looking for the baby. I think there were more pictures in that first chapter than in the rest of the book combined.
Now, this is an illustrated book. I mean, it does have pictures in. And I found myself wondering a little bit how important those pictures were to the story. So I spent a little bit of time looking at them. Did you guys feel that the pictures added something to the book, or whether they were just there?
I didn't think they were necessary personally. In reading the book, it's descriptive enough. However, being aimed at a younger audience, I think perhaps a younger audience might have appreciated them a little bit more. May have kind of poked at their imagination a little bit more.
Yeah.
But it wasn't necessary for me.
Yeah, no, I kind of had the same feeling. Especially like the first chapter with all the pictures did sort of feel like a graphic novel. Not that that's a bad thing, just that then I was kind of prepared for that to be the format for the rest of it, and then it wasn't, and it was a lot of text. And then so then when they threw a picture in, I was like, oh right, there's pictures in this. Kind of disorienting. But yeah, that is one of the things that I love about Neil Gaiman, is how very descriptive he is in terms of atmosphere and setting. And I mean, for me personally, I love the descriptions of what people wear.
The writing was very good. I mean, it is actually my first Neil Gaiman book. People have been telling me
Congratulations!
People have been telling me to read his stuff for a long time, and I've been looking forward to reading this stuff for a long time, but I just don't have time. So when this panel came up and they're like, we're doing a Neil Gaiman book, I was like, it's an excuse!
Yeah.
I did really enjoy his writing. It was very fluid, very easy to read. I mean, as an adult who reads more complicated stuff, I appreciated it, the flow of it, but I can also see from a younger audience how it would probably be a very, very easy read.
Yeah.
So
I got this copy from the library, and it was just a little weird too. I was going, I had to go downstairs to the children's section. Like, this feels very odd, looking for a book called The Graveyard Book in the children's section. It's so many bright colors. It's like princesses and knights in shining armor and talking animals. And then there's this like dark bluey purple, The Graveyard Book, right in the middle of all this. I'm like, it just looks so out of place.
Did you dress up all like super goth and put your hair in like pigtails like Abby from NCIS and walk in and be like, do you have The Graveyard
I should have done that. No, I was wearing about 10 layers because this was like Tuesday or Wednesday, and it was minus a billion.
To our foreign audience, it's cold in Canada.
It's so goddamn cold. But the other thing I love about Neil Gaiman's writing, and this applies to his young adult novels as well as his grown-up novels, is the wordplay. I think that was what was kind of most fun, was the villainous group is the jacks of all trades, and they all have their various nicknames that are all common sayings, like Jack Tar and Jack Frost, and you get all the. I thought that was clever. I enjoyed things like that.
It's kind of sad there was no Jack in the blocks.
Yeah, there should have been. It's true, there wasn't, was there? There were so many things you could do with that.
Or maybe he just got killed in Vancouver.
Could have been.
I hear that happens
Vancouver
there.
or Melbourne or whatever.
Not as bad as Toronto.
Yeah. And the other thing I love, and again, this is one of those things that I noticed happening, and I think I'm pulling too many parallels between Neil Gaiman things, because the day before I started reading The Graveyard Book, I just finished Neverwhere, which is one of his adult novels, which was also excellent. But it's one of those things where there's so many little seemingly throwaway scenes that'll happen earlier on in the book that then tie in later. Like, I liked that Scarlet came back. I liked that the Ghoul Gate was very relevant later on, because that felt sort of like a throwaway scene to me when I read it.
And that's one of the things about his writing that I actually rather enjoyed. Two things actually. One was the pacing. It kind of kept things moving throughout the entire book. I didn't really feel bored or kind of dull at any real point in the book. And secondly, and tied in with that, is that his writing was concise. There's no needless scenes. Everything that he wrote had relevance in the story, and like it tied in like the ghouls and like
and
later on.
if he mentions something, it will come back later.
Yeah. Yes, so you have a list of things to talk about.
I have a big list. Okay. One thing I want to discuss was Nod's graveyard powers.
Nod's graveyard powers?
Yeah. I mean, when he's accepted by the graveyard, it imparts him certain powers.
Freedom of the graveyard.
Yeah, freedom of the graveyard. Now, stuff like being able to fade in and out of sight, you know, this kind of stuff. How did you feel about his powers? Did you enjoy them? Were they cheesy? Were they cool? Like, feelings? Thoughts?
I really loved that aspect. Because I think it's one of those things that but I like the fact that, I mean, spoiler alert, but I like the fact that he sort of grew out of them, because it kind of made me think of the Polar Express. I don't know if you guys read the Polar Express when you were kids, but you know, in the beginning the boy goes to the North Pole. He was never a kid. Sorry, I'll just talk to you. There we go. But you know, boy gets on the train, goes to the North Pole, meets Santa, and he gets a little bell from one of the reindeer. And he, you know, when he gets home on Christmas morning, he and his sister can both hear the bell, but his parents are both like, oh, that's so sad, it's broken. Because you can only hear the bell if you really believe in Santa, and eventually his sister grows out of it as well. And so I thought it was kind of, because there's so much you believe in when you're a kid. Like, yeah, you could, I totally, you know, with the fading and the walking in and out of graves and mastering fear and terror and all these sort of supernatural things. I thought that I really liked all that stuff.
Yeah, and with his living twin was Scarlet, right? The girl that came in the beginning there.
Yeah.
And the parents' reaction, oh, it's just an imaginary friend, it's normal at that day and age. Don't need to really go into that. It's from the kids' POV, not from the adults.
Yeah.
But I mean, okay. Yeah, that's what would
of
be,
course you made a nice little friend in the graveyard, dear.
That's perfectly normal. Let's keep coming back.
Yeah.
I also like, because she got to know him so well, later on she was sort of quasi-impervious to his graveyard powers of fading in and out of sight. She could pick him out, you know?
Yeah.
So that was kind of cool. That was kind of well done.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the ending?
Okay. They built up the character Jack quite a bit. I mean, he started off the book by killing everybody, and, you know, from his point of view, he was a very careful, methodical, dangerous sort of guy.
Yeah.
I felt that in the end, he really wasn't that much of a threat. I did not feel that, you know, he turned out to be the big bad that they sold it to me in the beginning of the book. You know?
Well, even the other Jack said that, well, we thought sending the best of us, that being Jack, the one, the guy you're talking about there, the man Jack, to kill you would be sufficient. So he's apparently the best of the group. Not really.
I kind of enjoyed that though, because, you know, again in the first chapter you do sort of get that chill of, wow, this guy's so sinister and so ruthless and brutal, and but then like when you get to the conference of them, when they're all sitting around talking, and you sort of see him from the other's point of view, you're like, no, it's not so bad. And I think that was one of my favorite things about this book in general, is there's so many things that you know, you're sort of taught to think are scary when you're a kid, like witches and ghosts, and I think that this book was great for sort of dispelling a lot of common childhood fears.
And even Bond was told, no, don't go down there, don't go down there. But of course, he's the curiosity of a kid. He has to go down there. What does he do?
Yeah.
Well, he makes friends with this person or talks to this person anyhow. And,
exactly.
You know,
even the ghosts are scared of the witch, and you know.
I guess from that point of view, like you're saying, it makes a little bit of sense that, you know, the big bad turned out not to be so bad after all. But for the purposes of the story, I felt it was a little bit of a letdown how easily, you know, it turned out. So I would have liked it to be a bigger boss fight. Kind of.
Yeah, I can see what you mean, but at the same time, I don't know, that didn't bother me so much because I think that, from my reading of it anyway, the bigger point of the story was less about dealing with the man Jack and more about conquering fears and figuring out how to live your life the way you want to, and things, you know, nice lessons along that line.
Well, it was actually meant to be kept pretty light as well. Neil Gaiman apparently originally had the idea back in 1985. He saw his 2-year-old son, Mike, is pedaling with his BMX around a graveyard near the home, and he was recalling how comfortable his son looked there. So, you know, he had no worries, no fears about anything. He was just going around as if having lots of fun. And so he was like, well, I could write something a lot like the Jungle Book and set in the graveyard. And so that's what he originally attempted to do. You know, first attempt, he's like, I'm not good enough to write this, and then he reattempted to do it, which is what he got here. So that's where, you know, Jungle Book is pretty light, but there's death in that too.
Yeah, Jungle Book was pretty scary. But it was one of those things that until I finished the book and was reading the acknowledgments at the end, I totally didn't pick up on the Jungle Book parallels.
I didn't either.
And then when I saw that, you know, his first acknowledgement was to Rudyard Kipling for the Jungle Book for inspiration, I was like, oh my god, it's even called the Graveyard Book. And then I started piecing it together, like, wow, not paying attention, like, yeah, Silas is a very Bagheera character, and you know, it all sort of started falling into place. Wow. Good work, Neil Gaiman. You win that round. You magnificent bastard.
Okay, so going back to the topic of life lessons, how did you feel about Scarlett's reaction to the final battle? Because basically, I thought that she overreacted just more than a little bit.
I did too, but I think I thought that because I am so used to reading books where it's all about, you know, kids vanquish monsters, kids win the day, you know, that's like all of the young adult fantasy is the kids band together and defeat the bad guy. And so, but then when I was thinking about it, I'm like, no, I can totally see that she would react that way. Like, to me it did feel like an overreaction, but at the same time I thought it was also probably pretty realistic.
Well, I mean, one side you're sort of expecting her to be like, you know, wow, you saved us, good job, and on the other side, as it turns out, she's like, wow, you're a frickin' monster too.
And I never want to see you again. And you're like, oh, that's really harsh.
Way to be ditched, dude.
You know, you have these fond memories of enjoying your time with this kid back when you're young, in the beginning of the book, and then you see him again, you're expecting that same kind of thing, and then all of a sudden you're surrounded by bad guys, and, oh, I didn't kill them. Oh no, not at all.
Yeah.
Just, I led them to their own deaths.
Or at least to their broken ankles.
Right, so what's happened to you in the last 8 years? I think it's more the shock to the expectation of what she expected there still to be, and there wasn't. He had lost. Well, he still had a certain amount of innocence about him, but when he was talking to Silas before, it's like, no, it's not me that, it's not me that, you shouldn't be afraid for me, you should be afraid for them, or the like.
Yes.
It's like, okay, he's taking a little bit more darker notes here.
From her point of view, I guess that does sort of make sense. I mean, she signed up.
She hasn't seen him since he was 5 years old.
Yeah, she signed up to this relationship as my imaginary friend, and what she got was, you know, Lord of the Graveyard, so.
She's like, too much?
Be honest with people.
I know.
Yeah.
Interestingly, it did win several awards, and it came out in 08 and in 09. The Newbery Medal, Hugo Award for Best Novel, the Lucas Award for Best Young Novel, and the Carnegie Medal. Is nominated for 3 others as well. So you know, obviously the critics enjoyed the novel as well.
Which makes sense, because I think it is one that, you know, doesn't, at least I don't think, it doesn't talk down to kids. It doesn't assume that kids need to be coddled and, you know, pampered and protected from the world. I mean, it does involve a lot of protecting from the world, but not in the same way that most others do, you know. And I loved, one of my favorite aspects of it, I don't know what you guys thought of this part, was how when they would introduce a character, a ghost in the graveyard, it would say, it would, in brackets, have your birth year, death year, and whatever the inscription on the tombstone was. I loved that, because when I was a kid, I loved running around in graveyards, and I loved reading the tombstones and imagining people's life stories, so it really
name, date, brackets.
played to that.
Here she lies, yes, now lies with angels, or whatever.
Yeah, exactly, yeah, I thought that was pretty awesome.
So I read something random. I thought it'd be kind of cool, but it turns out it was canceled. Originally, there was supposed to be a film made of this. Filmmaker Neil Jordan was signed on to write and direct a film adaptation, but unfortunately, Disney acquired Miramax and is canceled. So
Hate life. Yeah.
They destroy all things, just like Star Wars.
Pretty much. Yeah, one thing that I was going to say that was related to something we were talking about was I did appreciate how it kind of, Bod grew up a lot through the course of the book, because he's what, 15, 16 by the end?
Yeah.
Something like that. But without sort of that needless passage of time, extraneous paragraphs saying, and time passed and he grew and blah 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 blah. Like, it would just sort of seamlessly, one thing would flow into the next, and you'd be reading it, and then all of a sudden there'd be just a sentence saying he was about, you know, 10 years old now. And
my favorite way that they demonstrated that was that obviously the ghosts didn't grow with him.
Yeah.
So they were talking at one point how his, you know, best friend when he was 6 was a kid who had died when he was 6, but now he was hanging out with ghosts who are 10 years old because he had outgrew his 6-year-old
they didn't
ghost.
have as much to talk about.
Exactly,
Him and the 6-year-old ghost, which kind of made me sad. And honestly, when I finished this book, I think I spent a solid half hour just sobbing uncontrollably. I couldn't handle it.
Also,
it broke me.
His relationship with the witch girl changed a lot as he grew older, and I thought that was a little bit more interesting. And I'm kind of sad that they never actually went anywhere more with that. I thought Neil Gaiman could have pushed that a little bit more.
I think that if he had pushed that a little more, it would have felt forced, though. I thought it was...
I think he's got enough talent that he could have made it.
That's true. I think if anybody could have made it work, he probably could have. But I thought it was... I really liked how that just sort of, you know, ebbed and flowed, and it just felt like very organic, very realistic. But anyways, so to wrap up, ratings out of 5 stars. Matthew, you go first.
I think as far as being a children's novel, it is fairly well written, but it's still a children's novel, so out of 5 I'll give it 4.
Rob?
I greatly enjoyed the book. I find it really hard to put it onto a 5-star range, though, because I really dislike giving everything, you know, 4 stars. But it's really
3.8, 4.2.
Yeah, get into the decimal.
It really.
That's what that's like.
It deserves somewhere between a 3.8 and a 4.1, I'd say. So, yes.
I will bathe in your blood.
I'm also going to give it 4 because really my only issue, and it's not even really an issue, it's just an issue from where I stand now as a grown-up reading it, is I can't tell what age group it would be best for. So I'm just not really sure of the target audience, and that confuses me because I don't want to be thinking about that when I'm trying to read a book. But yes, so we're all more or less on the same page, which I like. Okay, who wants to draw next week? You do.
Sure.
I don't want to be responsible for next week.
Excellent. Excellent. Wizard's First Rule, Terry Goodkind. So, that will be in, well, I guess I say next week, but week after next, because next week will be Akira. Yeah, well, nailed it. Okay, well, have a lovely time. We'll see you all next week for Akira.
Have a good one. Ciao.